Hello, my name is Allison Wickstrom, and I am a school psychology student at NAU. While I may be new to learning about some of the psychological components of the brain that we are taught as school psychology students, I am certainly not new to working with students, especially teenagers. So I've worked as a special education teacher for the past 13 years. The first 2 of those years was working with teenagers in the middle school setting, and the last 11 years has been working with the older teenagers in the high school setting. So because of my interests and because of my years of experience, I chose to present to you information about the teenage brain. So let's talk about the teenage brain. So the brain is made out of tons of interconnecting parts, and each of them has its own function. Seeing, moving, smelling, feeling, thinking, you name it, the brain does it. During childhood, the brain is so focused on developing these different parts of the brain that it really doesn't communicate too well with the different connections. But it is in the adolescent years that this communication begins to improve. So with this shift, however, noticeable and observable behavioral changes begin to happen to these young adults. So before we begin talking about some of these observable changes, let's start talking about the neurological changes. So here we have a picture of a neuron. The neuron is made up largely of the neuron somas, and this contributes to the majority of what we call the gray matter of the brain. And then we have the myelinated axons, which makes up the majority of the white matter of the brain. So there are two big changes that are happening in the brain during adolescence. So during the teenage years, there is an increase in the myelin in the brain. So myelin is this white fatty substance that coats the axons, and it helps to make communication between the neurons faster and more frequent. So because of this increase in myelin, the brain actually communicates 100 times faster and has a 30 times shorter resting period between communication. The result is a brain that is 3,000 times more effective in communication between the neurons. During this time, the white matter of the brain is increasing. While all of this is going on, there's another major change that is happening in the brain. The gray matter, which is associated with our thinking and our processing information, begins to decrease during these years. This is happening because of what we call the pruning process. So just like when we prune unwanted leaves from a huge tree in the front of our yard, the brain is pruning away unused and unnecessary connections in the brain. So the coolest part about the pruning process is that it allows the teenage brain to start specializing in certain areas, such as athleticism or artistic abilities. So this is when teenagers can really start to find what their passions are. Not all parts of the teenage brain are upgraded at the same time, however. The prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of regulating our behaviors and making decisions, is actually the last part of the brain to get upgraded. It isn't until a person is in their mid to late 20s that this part of the brain is fully mature. I always like to tell students that there's a reason that many car companies will not rent to people until they are at least 25 years old. The prefrontal cortex controls a lot of functions, including our impulse control. And because this area is not fully upgraded until much later, adolescents are much bigger risk takers. Additionally, until the area of the brain gets upgraded, teenagers process information that would normally occur in the prefrontal cortex from their amygdala. The amygdala is how we process our emotions. So this is why teenagers have such deep and complex emotions that they really are unable to fully control. So why do brains do this during the teenage years? Doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Well, it actually does, because there is a strong evolutionary component. Two areas of the brain that I'm going to focus on are peer acceptance and risk-taking behaviors with this evolutionary component. So anyone that is a teenager, works with teenagers, or remembers being a teenager probably knows that peer acceptance is an extremely important component to being an adolescent. Evolution can actually help explain this. So as young children, it is necessary to have that strong relationship with one's parents for survival. But as they become older, teenagers start to rely less and less on their parents, and they start building stronger relationships with other people, eventually leading to the procreation of their own children. Additionally, these peer relationships help teach them how to be compassionate, caring, empathetic. All of these things are necessary in order to be happy and successful as adults in the long run. Risk-taking behavior can also be explained as an evolutionary necessity. It is during the adolescent years that individuals start to think about living apart from their families. This requires some very risky behaviors. Of course, not every situation is the same, but think about it. Why the heck would a young adult move out of their luxurious parents' house, the one with a climate controlled environment, cable television, free internet access, etc., 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 to move into a tiny apartment, share with multiple people, having no luxuries at all? I'm sure I'm not the only one that has experienced a similar situation during the adolescent years. If teenagers were able to think rationally, as many adults would like them to do, would they ever move out of their parents' house and take that risk? If I could do it again, I don't think I would. So, how can adults help teenagers? In my opinion, I think one of the best things that we can do is to avoid giving too much expert advice. As adults, we like to ensure that our wisdom that we have accumulated over the years is shared with adolescents so that they can make better choices than what we have made. This can lead, however, to adults getting very overly offended if their advice is not valued and accepted by the teenager. I'm certainly not saying that no advice should be given. However, it's smart to avoid going down too many rabbit holes. Another thing that we should do is just be frank about what is going on inside the teenage brain. Helps teenagers understand that any difficulty that they may be experiencing during their upgrade is completely normal. And more importantly, it is only temporary. Provide opportunities for teenagers to engage in healthy risky behaviors. Part of the upgrade process makes teenagers extremely impressionable, and this can result in both good and bad things. Because the communication between neurons is so fast during this time, it allows them to learn information much quicker than an adult would learn information. This quick learning, teamed with an adolescent's tendency towards risky behaviors, is much harder to break and can have much more detrimental effects if something such as addiction starts to happen. Helping teenagers engage in healthy risky behaviors should be emphasized. These behaviors could include participating in a sport or acting in a play. These behaviors help to satisfy that need that the brain is craving, but doing so in a very healthy way. Above all, adults should help adolescents figure out who they are and just be supportive of to them along the way. We need to be that shoulder for them to cry on when they once again did not take our advice and had their heart broken by the wrong person yet again. We need to be that strong, even tempered presence in their life. And even if told that they hate us and that we should go to hell, that we will still be there for them with open arms and holding no grudges or hard feelings. Let's not make life too easy for them, however, so that they never want to take the risks and see the possibilities that life can offer. Let's also make sure that we are not completely ignorant and be able to recognize when those risky behaviors get out of control and need adult intervention. With our mature and developed brain, we adults need to cheer teenagers on and marvel at each of their new upgrades that develops over the years. Thank you very much.